We're at a historic moment in our industry today, and we're at a turning point at this very moment, at this very panel. And if we could get maybe someone from Microsoft here to participate, I'd like to talk about the battle of open versus closed. Up until now, all vendors have been in charge of us, have been in charge of our data, have been in charge of our content. They decide what happens to our content and our profile data. And this is both on blogging platforms and social networks and everything. And that era is changing. And we have on the panel today vendors who are enlightened enough to understand that what users want to do is that users control their own data, not the vendors. And in fact, Microsoft is joining that club. All right? So Yahoo figured out how to be open against Google, and Facebook figured out how to be open against MySpace. And so in the future, it'll be a clear battle, closed versus open. Guess which side I'm on. All right? So we're going to try to specifically talk about two-way conversations, which is one of the benefits of having an open world. And of course, to first start off with that, we've got to figure out what the hell is a conversation. Because what a conversation is to the blogosphere is different than that to people into the mobile world or IM, which is different than people in the corporate world, which is different for people who are in the consumer space. So we've got different vendors here who will talk about the definition of what that means. And I'll start off with Joe. Joe, tell us who you are, what company you're doing, and what you think a conversation is.
Sure. My name is Joe Kleinschmidt. I am the CTO and co-founder of a company called Leverage Software. So what we do is create a platform which companies can use to build online communities. So a number of our customers include folks in the tech space, in the media space, folks like Salesforce.com, InfoWorld, Dwell Magazine. Actually, Microsoft has built a couple of communities based on our platform. But you probably won't recognize our name because we're typically the platform or the infrastructure behind a community that a company will build. So I guess to answer the question about closed versus open, what we've seen is because we are approached by companies with different needs, we support both. So we have a model for some folks, for example, who are in the financial services space, for whom privacy is very, very important, and they want to make a community of perhaps several thousand of their partners, of their customers, and so forth, and they want to allow those people to interact and communicate with one another. Whereas a media company might be much more interested in creating a community that's much more open, where they're actually engaging readers and trying to draw more casual people together to communicate. So to say what is a conversation or what is communication for us, it's any number of things. There are communication paths between individuals, one-on-one communication. We have some communities that are built around groups and sort of many-to-many communications. There's communication around a customer to a vendor and so forth. So we're a little bit, I suppose as a platform vendor, a little bit agnostic on that and really let our customers drive the type of community that they're trying to build.
Okay, but does that mean message board or blogging or IM or what? What specifically is the technique, the technology that's used to enable the conversation?
For our platform, all of those things. So we offer all of those things that a particular customer can decide what to use and not to use. I think you mentioned IM or chat. That's something that we do, and I think it's a really interesting example of a way to enable communication in that we have several magazines. What they do is they find a prominent blogger or a prominent person in the community for whom those readers want to connect with, and they'll schedule monthly chats and allow people to come in and connect. So it's a little bit more of a sort of a moderated community discussion, which I think is an example for me of just the fact that communication is not any one thing, that there's a whole spectrum, and it really depends on the particular social interactions that you're trying to encourage.
All right, coolio. All right, so we got Aaron, and I should say that on the panel there are 3 traditional social networking companies. My company, Joe's company, and Facebook, where Dave works. And then there is a couple of variants, okay? And one of the variants is a company called 6 Apart. And they actually make a number of different products that all kind of skirt around and very much exemplify two-way conversation. So Aaron, why don't you tell us about how you guys define conversation, which of course is different for each of your products.
Absolutely. So, yeah, 6 Apart is the blog company. We define blogging pretty broadly as reaching the audience that you want to and engaging that audience in a conversation. So this panel is very germane to what we do across all of our products. We have products for professional communications. We have products called Movable Type and TypePad, one of which is software, the other of which is a hosted product. These are very much geared toward professional and semi-professional communication. They can be used for publishers to reach their consumers. They can be reached for companies to reach their customers. They're used internally as knowledge management systems. We've got companies that use them for internal HR information dissemination, for example. They're used to power blogs for CEOs of companies or other executives to express their personal opinions and express business objectives in a more personal way. Very, very wide variety that blurs the line between blogging and content management and knowledge management and a whole lot of different kinds of systems and makes them all more conversational and creates communities around what businesses are trying to accomplish. And then we have 2 products that are more personal technology products. LiveJournal, which is one of the older and better established social networks, and Vox, which launched last year. And both of these are also geared toward trying to reach a particular audience. So you have a lot of control over who has access to what you're saying. And different audiences will have different visibility. So you can have some things that are visible to the public, some things that are visible only to your family, some only to your friends, and so on. And it's all about facilitating conversations across a wide variety of different ways and places. In the real world, there isn't one way that people have conversations, right? There are special places that we go to have those conversations, cafes, bars, etc., meetings. But there are also just incidental conversations that happen along the way. And we view this as a really ubiquitous technology and something that is used to have conversations in a wide variety of different contexts.
Julio. All right, so as we were preparing for the panel, Evan, who I've known for many years, said, well, wait a minute, I'm not here to talk about two-way conversations. And I said, well, dude, so what is a conversation? I mean, what do you think a conversation is? So, Evan.
Right.
Or do you care?
Of course. Conversation seems like a good thing. The context I'm coming from is I'm with Twitter. Twitter is very much a communications tool. You may have seen it on some of the screensavers here where people send little updates about what they're doing, ostensibly, but those messages can really be about anything. And I think the conversation happens in a couple different ways. One is in a distributed fashion, sort of like the blogosphere, when someone posts something, an idea, and someone riffs off of that either directly or indirectly. And the same thing happens on Twitter. And additionally, Twitter is all about keeping in touch with your friends, and it's really about the small groups of people where Twitter shines, and it can connect people and keep them in touch all day, and then it facilitates conversations outside of Twitter. Does that answer?
In other words, it would be a very limited conversation if the only thing you talked about is what are you doing?
Exactly, and we're not that strict about what you send over Twitter, but I started thinking about the word conversation. I'm not sure Twitter is very much about communication. I don't know if it's conversation. I don't know if that's semantics or
But as one of the early blog fathers, I mean, you did give birth, okay? And so as you know, and you participated in the day, just by putting a link in your gutter, by putting a blog roll in your gutter and pointing to somebody, that supposedly was a conversation. Or the fact that Technorati would pick up a link or Google and associate you with somebody else talking about the same thing, all of a sudden that's a conversation. So the word has been kind of stretched, to say the least.
Yeah. I've heard markets are conversations.
Definitely. See, I think of Twitter as a new kind of thing where I'm taking my thing and putting it into a cloud. And the fact that we all share the same cloud is kind of a fuzzy, kind of cloudy thing. But, that's what they call conversation. Okay. All right. So Dave is from a company that's doing some serious butt kicking right now, and I believe your rate of growth is greater than MySpace. We know that humans are migratory beasts, and that a lot of those people in MySpace came from Friendster, and now they're in Facebook.
We'd certainly like that.
And the odds are they might keep moving, right? Though we haven't found out where all the bees are. They apparently have disappeared. But back to humans. So Facebook is a leading player in this world, and you guys are facilitating a lot. I mean, my sons go up, 3 to 4 times a day, and you have probably the most amazing numbers, I think, right now in terms of usage. And clearly, you're facilitating conversation. So how do you guys see that as a facilitator?
Absolutely. We see ourselves as a social utility. It's something where we enable people to connect to each other with the people around them and do things like that. We do that by creating tools that really mimic the world around you. We do things like enable you to have a profile and an identity and connect to your friends and really keep up to date with everything that they're doing. We're trying to make that conversation, if you will, as efficient as possible. So we try to make our tools make that conversation efficient and really just enable you to get the most information about the people that matter to you.
Right, but you guys have various different techniques to do that, right?
Sure.
You have this news feed, you have like a whiteboard thing, you can be friends across networks. There's a lot of different ways that these connections are made, right?
Absolutely. We have a network model where that's really how we define our privacy. In the beginning, we sort of said, a college is a great way to define community and a great way to define connections. And so we enabled people to join these networks using their .edu email addresses. And that was able to really define a true identity. Because they actually go to this college, because they can only be issued one email address, that enabled people to join these little networks inside of Facebook. And really that also enabled these really strong communities to happen because each of those users we knew was part of one of those networks. And so as time went on, we rolled that out to workplaces, which also have a definable email address. And we've gone now to high schools as well as geographical areas, which again, the networks just mimic the real world. So.
All right, so as I was preparing for this panel, it struck me that there really are kind of different classes of conversations. There are where 2 individuals are talking to each other. There's the often sought after conversation of a individual to a vendor. And then there are almost like a vendor to vendor kind of facilitation, because if somebody like a MySpace wants to shut themselves off and be a data silo, what they're saying, well, we're going to capture all these people and lock them into our little world, and except for those damn widgets that's happened to sneak in somehow, we're in charge of these people. We're going to monetize all these people. That's a Jonathan Abrams quote, by the way, to monetize and exploit his users. But meanwhile, to me, you want the opposite. You want to facilitate getting people to talk to each other. So let's have 3 discussions, one on individuals to individuals, one individuals to vendors, and one vendors to vendors. So specifically, individuals to individuals. What are the particular techniques and thoughts do you have about individuals? We'll start with Evan, because that's kind of in one sense really what Twitter is about, right?
Definitely. It's definitely about enabling individuals to connect, and that's pretty much what we care about. And so specific techniques is we frame it all around the question, what are you doing? There's features in there that let you respond to someone directly and say, what are you doing? All this happens over the web, over IM, or over SMS, as well as a bunch of different API tools. And Twitter is, you can choose whether you're open and public or you only get seen by your friends or people you approve. And it seems to, it's in a lot of ways when someone direct messages someone in Twitter, it's very much like SMS to someone, but it's usually in response to something that the first person wouldn't have sent as a direct message. So I think it enables a lot of direct communication that wouldn't have happened anyway, because people are just throwing these things out there, and if someone cares, great. If they don't, no harm done.
Right, so a lot of times people describe Twitter as SMS with presence. And first time I discovered presence in a social environment was LiveJournal. So let's discuss how LiveJournal and I think some of your other products do also enable individuals to connect to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is one of the things where you can't be doctrinaire about oh, we're a web company, oh, we're an SMS company, et cetera. People want to communicate through a variety of different channels, and it's important to be able to provide presence, to provide notifications, and so on. So whatever conduit is desirable for a particular person, they can be communicating through that. And what Twitter's doing is very interesting. You could take a cynical point of view for a feature point of view and go, hey, Twitter is LiveJournal limited to 140 characters of text or something, but obviously they're onto something with what they're doing. And little cues, little tiny variations in the way that you communicate can be very important. And that's, again, an analog from the real world. I think we're still in early days of understanding how to communicate through computers with one another. But in the real world, you meet somebody and you may enjoy the interaction or not enjoy the interaction based on very subtle cues. And I think the same thing is true in communicating online or through SMS. And when something feels natural, it's very important to be able to facilitate that. So I know that at 6 Apart, and I think at all these companies, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what is it that makes that communication natural, and how does it just sort of feel right, and how do you enable people to express themselves in a way that reflects what they're trying to get across. And that's a really critical and subtle thing, and it's hard to put it in purely technical terms because there's an aesthetic to it as well.
Okay, so along came Google and discovered that by spidering everything, they could actually keep track of conversations. And so all of the vendors on this panel have blogging tools. You put something up on the web, Mr. Google and Mr. Technorati come by, they scoop it up, they put it into this engine, and now the individual person can interact with the Technorati or Google to figure out, what's going on, what's the conversation, what's hot, what's not, can I participate, how do I interact with all that? So how do you guys, do you guys game Google at all, or how do you play in that world? Where do you let it just flow naturally? Do you try to SEO it a little bit, or do you push your way up, or how do you think of it, Dave?
How do I think of?
Do you just let the conversations flow? Do you want your conversations to come up? Do you try to keep track of the conversations just going on in your world?
We really see it, it's all about the people. They're having the conversations with each other. They have a conversation in the real world. They take pictures in the real world.
So you wouldn't necessarily know.
Yeah, it's all about just enabling that information to flow as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Okay. And
getting out of the way,
Joe,
if you will.
how do you guys see it? Piece of just part of the game?
We don't game Google.
Okay, hold on. How many people out here game Google? All right, come on, be honest. There's an entire industry called SEO, right? Probably down the hallway they're having it. Yeah. So anyway, just so you know, SEO means search engine optimization. What that means is you do certain things to get a high Google ranking, right? Anil knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, so this is a reality. It's a business. I wish I could quote you how much money is made per year on it, but plenty of people sell their services offering to some company to get higher Google ranking, which is to get themselves noticed, because when you go hit a Google search, there's 80,000 hits on it, and your number's 79,000, you're not going to be too happy. So everybody wants to participate in the conversation. Imagine a big cluster of people. Everybody wants to move up to the front row and be heard.
Well, there's an interesting phenomenon there where, yes, if you're on one of our sites, we have high page rank, and you can get good visibility through Google. But we actually find a lot of people that want it absolutely the other way around. And in LiveJournal, for example, there's an option not to have yourself indexed by the search engines, because people want to be writing things where they don't necessarily want it to be a secret from people who are looking for it, but at the same time they don't want it to pop up as a result on a search engine, because it's something personal.
Yeah.
And a very large percentage of the users on LiveJournal elect not to be indexed by the search engine. So sort of a search
do you know what percentage that is? Over 50%?
It's not over 50, but it's quite.
I always thought of LiveJournal as like the goth girl talking about her recent piercing or something, and clearly goth girls are interested, but not clear if others are. Okay. So now, turns out. Oh, and let me ask Joe one question. Joe, does your platform have open APIs?
It does.
Okay.
Yes.
So I can say that all the vendors on this panel have open APIs, and one of the reasons for that is to interconnect systems together, whether they're services or applications or just content, subscribing. 6 Apart was part of the evolution of a standard called Atom. Evan, you were part of that as well? You were
Yes,
around?
yes.
Yeah. So there's a standard called Atom, and there have been these various techniques and technologies evolving over the years, of which I can pretty clearly say that Microsoft is now participating in that world to interconnect different systems together. So it is then the responsibility of the vendor to facilitate, it's almost like grease the skids on an ecosystem and a world that can have two-way conversations. Because if I can talk to you via an API interface and I don't have to go through a web interface, all sorts of cool automatic things can happen. Tracking of conversations, gaming of conversations, etc. So let's just start at the end. And how do you guys see what your APIs are about, and how does that fit into the whole notion of things?
Sure. We see our platform as, we want to make it as open as possible. One of the conversations we're having here is about openness. And Facebook itself is a lot about openness, about people expressing themselves, having an identity, connecting to others. And we really want to take that, all of the stuff that you can do inside of Facebook, and enable it to be used through a standard API. And so we've created this and expose certain types of data, the profile data, the photos, all the different things that make Facebook what it is to the outside world through APIs, so that developers can also access that data on behalf of the user. And we really want to be careful about how we do this as well, because we have this very defined privacy model where people can control their data very granularly and things like that. And so in building this API, we decided we need to make similar decisions to allow users to take their data where they want, but to also keep their privacy maintained.
So Evan, what was the logic behind creating APIs to Twitter?
Oh, the APIs are hugely important to Twitter, and I think at first we didn't realize how important. We thought like all web apps, we should have APIs because interesting things can happen. I created the Blogger API in 2001 just because I thought it'd be cool, and at that time I thought, well, people will help build features that I can't get to myself. And that definitely worked. With Twitter, it's worked even an order of magnitude better. In a very short period of time, we've had tons of API development. And there's a few different kinds. One is that for people are building clients, so just alternative interfaces to the service that provide a different experience. And because Twitter is just these text messages, it's very flexible in terms of what you can do with them. You can send them from anywhere, and you can get them out from anywhere. So people have really jumped on that and created some great clients. They've created bots that post to Twitter, and there's a couple of interfaces to do that. And people are building interesting services like wiring Twitter up to the earthquake report line, so you can hear about an earthquake and what its magnitude was. To news bots, to all kinds of things. And then there's simple things where people are just pulling in the data and integrating it with other profiles or services, like 30 boxes. You can have your Twitter status as a message in there. Of course, we allow you to get your data out in RSS or JSON, so you can easily plug it into anything. And then the third type of API tool is the visualizations. So, or visualizations are presenting the data in interesting ways. So there's a thing called Twitter Vision, which maps Twitter's on a Google map and makes it, and it's just fun to look at and use, and it's helped us from a marketing perspective, and it really demonstrates what Twitter is. So we've seen tons of benefit from it.
Now, Aaron, I know that you guys have been doing APIs for years. A certain person on the front row complains that many people don't know of 6 Apart's APIs as much as they should, and I'd like to use this opportunity to say that 6 Apart has lots of APIs, and probably could communicate better about those APIs. So here's your big chance. Let us know about your APIs.
My one big chance.
We hope that you'll have many more.
but not this big.
Well, we got 52 minutes. So.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. I'll just use the rest of that up then. No, it's true. We do have a tremendous number of APIs, from pioneering OpenID, involvement, as you mentioned, with Atom, wide variety of different ways that people can communicate. Because we know people belong to all kinds of different services, and it's very important that we interact with those, respect those, and enable the whole ecosystem of services that people belong to and use to function as seamlessly as possible. And it's still early days on that. It's not very seamless yet, but we do what we can to facilitate that. There are two other aspects of that. The second is open source. We contribute back a lot of what we develop, and it's used throughout the industry, and that helps companies focus on the things that are most important to them rather than on recreating things again and again and again. We've gotten good contributions back from Facebook, for example, on some of the software that we've open sourced, and it's really gratifying to see these things used through the industry. And the third area is, particularly with the movable type platform, it's really a platform that has the ability to create components and plugins to do almost anything imaginable. And this is really important because it's given rise to a whole ecosystem of independent developers and professional services organizations and so on, which can take movable type and make it do almost anything and interoperate with almost anything in extremely flexible ways. And this is the way that it becomes the blogging platform that's powering, 80% of the Fortune 500 or something like this. And that's a really critical element of our success, because if you're going to be a major building block, you have to be a real platform, and you have to have that openness if you're going to sustain it.
Okay, and Joe, where does leverage come on all this?
We have a full set of APIs. There's first off a URL called labs.leveragesoftware.com if you want to check it out. We post everything that we have around APIs and documentation and so forth up there. So we support pretty much their APIs across the board for every element of our community. So if you want to do something around blogs or profiles or chats or group discussions or files or something like that, you have access to that, and that's just really born of our work with all of our customers who frequently want to take our platform and sort of twist it and have some flexibility in working with it the way that they want. The second area, actually, we built an Ajax-based widget toolkit on top of all of our APIs, and then built some developer tools to allow people to drag and drop certain elements of a community onto a page, and then we'll actually generate that code, and you can take that code and go post it on your blog or your website or something like that. And the idea there is not only just to provide the APIs, but actually to lower the bar as much as we can to people who are just interested in customizing things, to make it really easy for someone who wants to build a community, wants to facilitate a community, but has a lot of design experience and really wants to go to town and sort of customize the way they want to present that information, not just from within our system, but maybe what we've seen a lot of lately, which I think is very exciting, is this blending and using a lot of our APIs to blend community-driven or user-contributed content alongside of information that's sort of provided top-down. So we have, for example, a number of media companies. What they'll do is they'll take stories that their editors or their writers will publish, and then they'll say, but let's actually, bring these feeds about what people are talking about within the community and actually just sort of drag and drop things over onto that. So I actually think it's one of the most exciting areas of community building and actually just product building today to be able to facilitate that.
Beautiful. All right, so I'm actually going to pretend like I'm a panelist for a second, but certainly at this point from now on forward, please interact with us. So as I've been around the software business for 25 years, it amazes to me that there's so much duplication, there's so much similarity, but yet the pie is so much bigger that there's plenty of room to make a lot of money by all of us and all of you. And if you were in Europe or Asia, there's similar conferences going on and completely different sets of competitors and completely different markets, but yet more or less selling the same stuff. So you have to think of these vendors and these platforms as, in one sense, autonomous islands, but because we all have APIs, we can interconnect the islands together. And it's the movement and the interconnection, the driving along these causeways and bridges between these platforms is what our users want to be able to do. No user is going to want to lock themselves into one platform. So that's why it's very important to have APIs to interconnect things together. Now, conversations are one of the things that happen. the media that you have and the sharing of your stuff, whether it's your photos or your videos or your blog posts, whatever, that's another kind of interconnection between these systems. Communication on an ongoing basis, there's so many different ways that it's unraveling in front of our eyes right now as we speak. So that's what our platform does, the People Aggregator. We very much are all about open APIs as well. Everything that these guys said is what we do as well. And we also provide a platform for people to build out social networking and blogging platforms with it. What I wanted to do as I designed our product was make sure that the notion of customization and of adapting to this future world, of a distributed, decentralized world, is at the core of the architecture. Because that conversation that's happening, the unknown factors that none of us up here, I mean, a year ago, there's no way we could have predicted that Twitter would have taken off as it did, right? 6 Apart is being run by very traditional business practices where sales and profits come first. Facebook started with a college student thing, but then has evolved and grown bigger. So each of us are on our own journey, letting this decentralized world evolve. At the core of this is the ability to be open and to interconnect these different platforms together. If we're not open and we're closed, well, we'll see how good Google does it on their own. Okay? Google has APIs, but notice that every time they have an API, it's all about leveraging, and here I'm talking to an ex-Google guy, it's all about leveraging internally into what Google has. You won't see Google supporting and helping people on the outside. Typically not. Okay? And certainly you won't see Apple doing that kind of stuff, right? This has to do with built-in corporate DNA. Now here we are at a Microsoft conference, and again, 2-3 years ago, we could easily have put Microsoft onto that same list of companies that are the epitome of locking in their customers. What is that called? Oh yeah, Passport. That's what it's called, Passport, all right? But now we've seen through the efforts of Kim Cameron and the CardSpace platform, through the efforts of Robert Scoble, through the efforts of Dare Obasanjo and the Live Spaces platform, we're starting to see a new Microsoft. And by the way, this is what, their 4th reinvention of themselves? This is an amazing company that's able to recreate their DNA on the fly. And to me, that's very exciting because we need to have big companies like Microsoft supporting OpenID. We have AOL supporting OpenID, right? And of course, it would be nice if the people who actually invented OpenID might support it a little better. But that's just my own thing. But anyway, so in this world of openness, conversations are happening. And in fact, even what a conversation is kind of nebulous, right? If Dave Sifry was up here, he would have a very clear definition. Well, it's about your link, and you link to me, and I link to you, or Doc Searles. They all have this traditional notion of a conversation. To me, I'm not uptight about what the conversation is or what the definition of the conversation is. Please go have fun. Make money. Get laid. Make babies. Whatever. Old people, after you made your babies, you're still alive. Do you know how much money is tied up in the baby boomers? I don't see many baby boomers here, but these people ain't dying so fast, okay? And they want to have conversations too, right? They're trying to figure out what's going on. So it's all about the technology empowering these people to connect together, all right? So that's my spiel. Do you have any opinions or questions? No, get up, dude. Got the mic right there. Let's do it. Come on. Go for it.
My name is Nick Goldstein.
No, okay. You're going to have to talk because I can barely hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, right.
My name is Nick Goldstein. I'm from the Carbon Project. And talking about technology and the future of technology, I was wondering what your opinion about what we call Web 3.0 and peer-to-peer and IPv6 coming into play of that. Truly serverless, secured type of social networking.
Okay. I will give you my opinion, and of course the panel can lead in. First of all, I hate all labels, so I would refuse to comment on label Web 3.0. Technology moves forward. There clearly is a thing called technology gravity. So things that were very expensive and used to be the exclusive domain of small little niche things come down, and they become more and more prevalent. I imagine social networking will be embedded in chips in the future. Okay? All software shrinks down and gets embedded. IP6, yeah, we're running out of IPs. And what was the other one? Yeah, I mean, yeah, we move forward, dude. I mean, let's put it this way. The hardware guys don't want to retire, right? They want a job. The standards guys, they don't want to retire, so they got to keep inventing new standards, right? Moore's law. See, I actually don't think that Metcalfe's law applies to this world as much as we think. That it's not, in fact, not the network effect. It's not more the merrier. I think it's quality over quantity. I'd rather see 10,000 smaller distributed networks than small, tiny ones. But I'll leave it to the rest of the panel to comment on Web 3.0. The future.
I think everything that you mentioned is interesting, actually. We, our own personal role, what we try to do is essentially sort of be looking forward for our customers a bit, and looking at things like peer-to-peer. I think it's very interesting. So we have some folks who are sort of doing investigative work around that. As with, I would say, almost any interesting technology. I mean, I think that this is definitely something that's not static. I don't think that any of us up here would say, the way that we've done social networks or communities to date is the way that it's going to be. Absolutely not. I mean, for me, that's really, at the core and at the heart of things like open APIs and so forth, just as a sort of representative of saying, listen, things are going to change, and let's actually, we're talking about conversations and this idea of people within communities having that conversation. For us, actually, as a vendor, it's the actual product development is a conversation with our customers, so that what we're trying to do is say, well, what do you really need and what's really interesting to you? And when things sort of cross over a little bit of a critical point where the actual value to that customer to have a particular approach or a particular feature outweighs any sort of risk of adopting things too early, I mean, that's the time to engage. And I think that the beautiful thing with just the way of this model in software development today is that period between someone saying, this is really interesting, this is really engaging for my community, and this is something I want to do. The period between that point and actually being able to do something and deliver something has really, it's compressing and compressing and compressing so that people can kind of think about those things, and then we're able to act on them so much more quickly. So I think it's very interesting. I don't think, for me, there's any particular specific technology that's driving that.
Dave?
Yeah.
I guess to answer the question, we didn't even really see this world as a Web 2.0 world or a Web 3.0 world, whatever. This is just about the web. And in the past, the web has always been about connecting information and computers and things like that. And we really see the future as connecting people. And that's why we're creating an open platform. That's why we're doing the things that we do and focusing on technology, trying to drive forward the web in a way that will connect more people and make that information flow.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. I would add, there's really one technical innovation that matters to this, which is the ubiquity of computing devices that are interconnected to one another. And after that, it's all about human interactions. And it's about figuring out the ways that are appropriate in different contexts for people to communicate with one another, and modeling that in a way that's natural and fluid and effective. And there are a lot of technologies that support that, but those get driven by the communications needs and not the other way around. So we can geek out and talk about aspects of IPv6 and so on, but I think that misses the point about the way that people communicate and being able to provide that wide variety of different communications modes and creating appropriate technologies as needed and utilizing appropriate technologies as needed to facilitate that.
Now, Evan, I don't know how many of you know this, but when Evan decided to shut down an earlier effort, he announced that he was going to more or less create his own kind of incubator lab that was going to build coolio new things moving forward. So clearly he's got some idea of what's up.
What?
Or unless maybe you're just faking it along the way or something. I don't know.
Well, I think it goes back to what you said. Technology moves forward, and I don't know what the new things are. I mean, so Twitter is a new company that's spun out of my company that's called Obvious, and our goal is to create coolio new things. And but I don't have even specific ideas of what they are. I just think clearly there's a million more things to do, and we're going to.
Now, are you asking these young entrepreneurs to come and submit ideas to you, or what?
Sure.
Or do they have to live in San Francisco?
Yeah, we're flexible.
All right. Next question.
So obviously the whole API thing has kind of taken this world by storm, but there's also seems to be a lot of thrash in terms of just how you expose your services. I mean, you've got the JSON now and the REST and the SOAP and whatnot, and it kind of seems like now everyone's kind of got their own language. It's all exposed, but it's kind of overload because if you want to wind up talking to different services, you're really writing different code to hit different areas. Now, eventually, like in the blogging world, there seemed to be some APIs that kind of became standardized. I was wondering if you guys had considered some of that for the more standard social networking features, if there was any kind of standardization work going on, and how you saw some of that stuff kind of moving in the future, which really ties to I think the Web 3.0, or really what I'm thinking of specifically being the semantic web. Well, it's going to come.
Did you just say it and I shiver?
Well, shiver or not, it's coming.
Just don't use the semantic web term, because that means Tim Berners-Lee, RDF, swallowing a red pill, whatever.
It's nasty, but the idea is that eventually, I mean, we talk about merging people and communications, and I know that's what your companies are based off of, but from an individual's perspective, they're looking at functionality to enable them to do that.
Right, we just don't need to be doing these labels,
Well, there has to be a way to express what I'm talking about.
Well, it's called Twitter, whatever. Okay, so let me just ask the panel. I'll take up your question and we'll run with it here. So, gentlemen, heard of any open standards for social networking lately? Dave?
OpenID?
There you go, boom. All right, on this very stage yesterday, we talked about OpenID as the foundation layer, which is for authentication. Just make sure who that person is. And we're now working on the next layer above that, which is the attribute exchange, which is to be able to move the data back and forth. Okay? And then we've extrapolated a third layer of actions. So I could make a friend with somebody between networks. I could send them data. I could create or join a group between networks. I could merge my data. I could auto-invite people in. Lots of efforts. We'd love you to help participate in that effort.
So you kind of see OpenID as kind of like the base platform, and then you're going to start building more of the semantic
to just call it interconnection. And well, let me just plug one thing, because we are here at a Microsoft conference, okay? So my buddy Kim Cameron not only helped invent the info card space kind of technology, but he also built out a thing called the meta identity layer, okay? So if you could think of it as like a computer bus with all these little slots, and the entire Microsoft Vista ID system plugs into one of the slots, and Passport plugs into another slot, and Yahoo's identity system plugs into another slot, and the Facebook identity system plugs into another slot. And each of these identity systems are standalone identity systems. And OpenID plugs into an identity slot. And what this back plane does is interconnect these together. So it doesn't have to only be OpenID. All right? That just happens to be one open one. But Google ain't changing theirs, Apple ain't changing theirs, Yahoo, whatever. Everyone will still have their own ID systems. The trick is to interconnect them together. All right? And I'm sorry to attack you on semantic web. We love Tim Berners-Lee. All right? We love everybody. Kumbaya. All right. Next.
Hi, I enjoyed your audience taxonomy there. I don't think I quite fall into the baby boomer category, but certainly one of those old people who's had his babies and is still alive. So,
there you go.
From that
God bless life.
From that perspective, I've seen a lot of things come and go. Bell bottoms, conversation pits, fondue parties. It used to be email, then it was IM, then it was texting. These sort of modes of social interaction, and even these websites where we go to interact socially seem to get changed in and out pretty quickly. So my question to the panel is, do you see some underlying thing that is going to enable you to continue to grow and be relevant to an audience, or is this a fashion business where this is the cool place to go this year, and next year it's going to be some other place that's cool to go?
Gentlemen?
Okay, I actually don't know if I buy the premise of that these things come and go. You mentioned a bunch of things that came, and not many of them have really gone. And what changes and what is what's getting the hype currently. But even Friendster, which everyone counts as totally gone, has a significant audience that's growing. And there's just more people coming in, and things fragment and they diverge. But at least on the web, the whole pie is growing so much, especially outside the U.S., that so many of these things, there's room for 1 million more, and they're all growing.
Yeah, we used to say that.
That seems to have its limits at some
Well, no, but
point.
remember
It
that
certainly does,
when
but-
television
It has a people
came,
limit.
when television came, radio didn't go away,
Exactly.
right?
IM didn't go away and email didn't go away. The other two things you
it's all
mentioned,
still
that
there.
were-
It matters what you see.
I would also say there are some forms of interaction that are less transportable than others. It's fairly transportable if it's a network to collect, if it's a venue to collect friends, well, you can sort of do that anywhere. On the other hand, if it's LiveJournal and it's your journal of your life that you're sharing with people, you have more of a sense of identity potentially tied up in that. Or if it's Vox and you're sharing pictures of your children in a sort of a post-teen phase of life, let's say. That's also something that might be a little bit harder to transport. And certainly if it's a corporate knowledge management system being used behind the firewall and integrated deeply into your IT infrastructure, that's not something that's a flavor of the month. So I think we're talking about a lot of different kinds of conversations that occur, and some of them may be more transient and more replaceable than others. But in general, I totally agree that we're certainly in a phase of life right now, a phase of evolution, where we're adding more media and more rather than replacing.
Sure. And, excuse me. You talked a lot about email and IM, different asynchronous and synchronous communication methods. And really what this comes down to is network effects. As each individual person joins one of these networks, it becomes more valuable. And we look at Facebook as something where you can get all your people in there. It's one of those things where it's going to keep growing. The network will become more valuable. And we're just going to continue to add more tools and make information flow as easy as possible. And on top of that, it's a lot about trust. If you look at email is a lot about trust because somebody has an email address out there somewhere, and hopefully that communication that you send gets to them. With IM, they're there, they're present, things like that. With Facebook, we look at it kind of the same. Each of our users can trust and know that those connections that they've made will always be there, and that that communication will get to that user. So we sort of see that as being something that's pretty powerful.
Is Facebook replacing email use for a lot of people?
I don't know. I suppose you could look at it that way. We don't really see that as something that we're trying to do, but I think you could certainly say that we're making the whole idea of email more efficient, right? Email is a big chunk of text that tries to explain a bunch of things to somebody. Maybe you email one of your friends from a long time ago and say, hey, I've been up to this is what I've been doing. We make those communications much easier because you can just simply adjust your profile, change information. People can keep up with you on an asynchronous basis on their own time. And then when you need to communicate with them, it's much more succinct and the information, moves much more efficiently.
I still remember the first time I saw Rise. And it was introduced to me as a private email system because it came in with little brackets that said Rise. And if I went down this incredible ugly list of spam, the Rise one would pop out. And I went, oh, well, that's something from Rise. And it would be one of the first things I would answer, right? Now, of course, the problem was that as the number of social networks increased, and every social network is just spam generating all this crap, that is kind of swung pendulum. So people do all the communicating inside the thing. They don't send the email to SMTP. They just do it all within the network. And there's a network called A Small World, which is for aristocrats and snobby rich people, and they do all the communicating just within the social network.
I remember in the 80s we were very excited about the paperless office because we were going to be able to not generate all this paper and everything would be electronic. And the irony is that the paperless office consumes, I forget the exact number, something like 5 times as much paper as the old paper office ever did because it's so easy to print stuff out now that it's all on your paperless productivity applications. And I think similarly, you don't replace email and SMS and so on. In fact, you may generate a lot more of those in the process of having a new medium.
Sure.
But to answer your question, I mean, it is the fashion business. It is the media business. It is e-commerce, right? It is the new generation telephone, all the above. I mean, and that's the beauty of it is that it's a synthetic, generic thing that gets defined. It's as malleable as fast as you can convince Tim O'Reilly that it's the next big thing.
Certainly, and this is about technology, and it's our job as social networking or social media companies to put the best filter on all this information possible. As all this information grows, data grows. Like you said, data growth is now like far vastly beyond it where it was even in the year 2000. It's like order of magnitudes larger. And so it's our job to put the best filter on that as possible so that people can communicate with the people that matter to them most.
All right, next up here, to the mic.
How do you guys see nationality and language in the conversation? I'm bringing that because I'm Brazilian, and for example, in Brazil, the Brazilians destroyed Orkut, basically, for all that the business matters. I can imagine Brazilians invading Twitter or Facebook and putting stuff in Portuguese and so on. But it's a fact. People from other languages use services, and sometimes we participate in local conversations in our local languages, and sometimes we participate in the global conversation in English. And there's no good tools for you to switch in your profile anywhere. Now I'm speaking to my local community in Portuguese, now I'm speaking to the global community in English. Is there any effort on top of OpenID or on other standards to solve that?
Yeah, Facebook, what are you doing to work in Portuguese?
Well, certainly it's something that we look to in the future. You know, we continue to innovate. We know it's a worldwide community. We have lots of users all over the world. And as we move down that path, we'll go, you know, wherever we need to go. But currently, you know, those are things that we look at. So,
Aaron?
Yeah, well, we view ourselves very much as a worldwide company with a worldwide audience. You know, we're a private startup company, but we have offices in Japan and in Europe and very strong sales over there. We launched Vox simultaneously in many different languages, and you know, we don't view people speaking languages other than English as I think you said, ruining the services. We think that that's all part of a worldwide
There are companies
conversation.
like Photolog, for example, that hate that.
Yeah. But he's also probably referring to the prostitution and drug dealing, but that's just details, right? All right, and so for my own part, I'm moving to Italy this summer, okay? I spend as much time as I can out of this country, and, you know, I didn't vote for Bush, so, you know.
But how can I be at the same time both Brazilian and global at any of your services? Because I have to make a choice when I do my profile.
Let me just say this. This is a business opportunity. You have hit totally on a huge issue. Go make money. Turn around, hustle and nil. He's right standing right behind you. Go hustle and nil and just convince him to hire you. I don't know.
So I know part of this answer, and Joe, I apologize, I don't know your platform that well. Most of you are using like Memcache as part of your platform, and it's open source, and you're all contributing to it, but not in any kind of organized way, right? People kind of make a fix, throw it over the wall, and it settles out. And then something like OpenID, where everybody's trying to collaborate, and you get everybody in the same room, takes ages to accomplish the same thing. Right, so it's like the only way that different social networks work together is if everybody does it accidentally. Maybe if the question I have is, can you guys explain a little bit more about how the process of collaboration between networks works, or what the ideal is, how it should work? So like Facebook didn't have to contribute back open source changes to this platform and did. Why? How do we encourage more of that, and how do we encourage more interop?
I think that we're all about openness. We want to ensure that all the work, we do a lot of great work, you know, on things like Memcache and Thrift and these things that we release to the world, and want to enable other people to, you know, benefit from this great engineering and technology work that we do. So we're going to continue to do that. On the topic of OpenID, you know, we don't necessarily see OpenID where it needs to be in order to start contributing to it or collaborating with it. You know, we sort of see ourselves as a great ID. You know, Facebook has this amazing network. You've got all of your friends there, and it's a great way to communicate with other networks and things like that. You know, we've talked to Twitter. We do a lot of things where we want to make sure that people can take that data and move it where they want to. So until something like OpenID becomes a little bit more evolved, you know, then we'll get into that conversation. But.
So I somehow think Anil is sending this question to me, so I'll answer it directly. Memcache solved a very specific technical challenge. It worked really well out of the box, day one. Brad wrote a brilliant article about it, as we all remember, and it was, I think, 48 hours later that we had the code working. So that solved an immediate problem. The problem with OpenID right now is that all it does right now is single sign-on. And I don't think that's an end-user benefit. I don't think there's enough there. Though Brad would disagree.
We agree.
I agree too.
Okay, there you go. So would you please communicate this to Brad? Because he seems to be a little closed-minded in this, okay? So I don't believe that until OpenID has attribute exchange are we there, okay? And so at that point, once I get open attribute, I'm calling Dave, I'm calling these guys, and then we're going to talk turkey. If Scott Kvetten was sitting right here, he was sitting here yesterday. They're writing the libraries. We'll get that code. I'll promise you by the summer we'll have this going, and we'll facilitate the interconnection of these users' profiles. But even then, just the movement of the data probably won't even be enough. I think we really need to get to a third layer where actual actions are happening, actual verbs are happening. And then I think you're going to see the thing take off.
Well, I think that there's a natural evolutionary process here, and it holds true for any kind of standards, whether you're talking about ITU standards, IEEE standards, IETF standards, anything. And there are some exceptions, but there are very few to the rule that the first thing that drives the things that ultimately get adopted is some exigent need. You know, people do things because they need it, and there's a period of time during which it's piecemeal and everybody's doing different things, and it's only when the pain becomes great enough from that people need to band together and start harmonizing that this kind of thing happens. And I think we're still in the early days with these standards. If you try to impose a standard top-down, then you get something like the semantic web, which is sort of high concept, you know, interesting concept. Yeah, high concept, low yield, not exactly solving the problems that people have in the detailed ways that they need to be solved. So I think that now OpenID is at the point in terms of adoption, in terms of the extensions to the functionality and so on, where it's meaningful to get together a whole lot of people and start saying, okay, let's standardize it, let's extend it together. I think if you tried to do it a year ago, it would have been too early and it would have been irrelevant.
I was going to say, I mean, our own take, because we've worked with a number of different companies who are trying to build a number of different communities, the approach we've taken is more of a pragmatic one. So we say with our platform, okay, you can use our identity or authentication scheme if you don't have one, or if you have an external one, you can plug into that, right? And what's interesting there is I think what's great is over time, as that particular need gets solved again and again and again and again, and there's sort of that bubbling up of, okay, well, here's a standard just to make it easier out of the gates, right? That's wonderful. That's a wonderful thing to happen. But I can speak, you know, in our own experience. I mean, we had folks, you know, a year and a half ago who are saying, well, listen, we want to hook into this authentication scheme. We want to hook into this authentication scheme. And so we just really built our platform to say, well, okay, let's just say that we don't know what's going to happen here, so let's set ourselves up so that we can authenticate against any number of things. And then as that becomes more formalized, then great, then that'll be the natural extension. And I think that's, you know, identity and authentication is one area, and OpenID is actually really interesting in that area. But there are a number of different ways, and I think it's just, you know, for me, and I think what you were saying a little bit is that there has to be a little bit of a balance between sort of the pragmatic, let's work with what we have today, because we don't want to not build this community or not engage this conversation until everyone gets an agreement. But let's leave ourselves open so that we can essentially extend and make it more efficient and make it easier for us to move ahead.
Okay, next.
So in our community and in this conversation, openness is frequently invoked as this great virtue and closedness is this horrible evil. But all of you have chosen, you know, to keep certain things closed, and there will be parts of your services that are never made open, that are never, you know, made transparent to the outside world, that don't have data access models that allow for people to touch them or things like that, I assume. And so how do you think about the virtue of closedness? How do you think about what should remain closed and, you know, what should not be made open?
I can only speak for myself. Every single part of our data structure will be open. It's totally transparent.
I think it's a question of trading off the value that you get from opening something up against the effort required in doing so, and in keeping now you've locked yourself into a particular interface to it. You have to maintain that even if your needs change and so on. I think from our perspective, for the most part, it's just simply a matter of pragmatism and of making the most valuable things open and supporting those.
Doesn't it have to come down to business model, though, in a lot of cases? There's very clear reasons why you can't carte blanche do Google API queries in unlimited volumes and get all their data, because that destroys their business model and it uses tons of resources to do it. And so, I mean, from our perspective, that's something we have to figure out. We're not making money right now, but we have ideas about how that might work. And if we completely opened everything and let anyone in the world use our platform, I mean, maybe you open it up and then you solve that with licensing or or have limits, but that's when it gets more pragmatic and you have to figure out what those business models are. But right now we would be vulnerable to people saying, okay, let's not get our own short code and pay to send SMSs, let's just use Twitter if we completely opened up. So that you have to take that into account. We have to consider we want people to add value and we want to be as open as possible as long as we're getting some value for our costs too, because they're significant. And that's an ongoing challenge to try and figure that out, I think.
Last question.
Howdy, my name is Derek Hatchard. I just co-founded a company called Gigantic Labs, and we're sort of throwing things against the wall, trying to figure out what we want to do in terms of, we've got a long list of ideas. Pardon me?
We're here to help you figure it out.
Well, so one of the ideas, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned it. An idea that I had was sort of trying to figure out what it is that the baby boomers want out of computer facilitated social networking stuff. And I came to the realization that since I'm not in that user demographic at all, I'm not going to bother because I can't build something that I would use, so I don't really know what they're going to love. But I'd be interested to hear from the panel about what you're seeing from baby boomers and that generation on your social networks. What are they doing? Are there interesting characteristics of that population right now?
So I can speak to this a little bit just because we work in a pretty wide variety of communities. I mean, each of our communities has a little bit of a different flavor. And the phrase that we throw around internally for us is we call it communities of purpose, right? So there's this idea of social networking and community as, some place where, the kids are hanging out, right? Which is one purpose that's very interesting. And I think actually areas like the baby boomers, for example, is really by and large almost an untapped area for some really interesting purposes. And what I mean by that is, there's a community of purpose for me is really, there's a need that's really well solved by a community of people. So Amazon is a great example of, I want to buy a book or something else, and I want to know, which one I should buy. So if I have everyone kind of commenting on this is really great, you should check this out too, that's a really effective and efficient way to solve that specific need to drive something interesting. And so I think rather than saying, will baby boomers engage in a community that's similar to the type of people who are on Facebook right now or any of these other communities, it's an interesting question to ask. I think a little bit different way that I would approach it is to say, what is it that baby boomers want that they can really only or best get from their peers? Because they're going to be facing certain needs that are going to be very different from needs in other demographics.
Okay, next question.
Hi. I would like to know how do you see and how do you address the user ranking in each of your communities? Is it addressed or no? How do you see it?
User ranking?
User ranking, user credibility.
Reputation?
User reputation.
Reputation.
For example.
That's the R word there.
The key thing in Google, for example, is the way the page rank is done.
Right. Is it reputation in Facebook?
Reputation is just how you interact with people in the real world. You have, this communication that you do every day. We're having a conversation right now. I'm meeting these people. There's pictures being taken. All these things are happening, and they'll end up on your profile in one way or the other. And because of that, that's your reputation, right? Like you have this identity, and it's a very much it's a perfect replication of who you are in the real world. We enable certain things that make that, more efficient, I guess. People can post photos. They can publicly message you on what we call the wall. All of these things sort of create your reputation kind of automatically. It's just a perfect representation of how you interact in the real world.
Now, Aaron, you do. Well, hold on. Aaron does cross-technology core across all these 6-apart products. Now, so could conceivably there be a 6-apart reputation system that one would promulgate and permeate across the products?
I have no announcements to make today, but I think there's an opportunity out there to do something across a lot more than the 6-apart products.
Okay, so my own answer.
I would say, as far as the 6-apart properties are concerned, it's very different from service to service. So, at a very basic level, if you've got a typepad blog or a movable type blog, there are particular people with particular privileges, and so that's sort of an a priori reputation system there. On the more consumer-facing services, I would agree with what Dave was saying, but I would also say there's an exception to it, which is when you've got people who are malicious, it's bloggers or so on,
Sure.
and you need to be able to identify people who are just not genuine.
Absolutely.
And do you guys do that? You police
of course.
kick them out?
No, we have quite a few technical and social mechanisms in place to identify.
And Facebook does that too?
Yeah, similarly, we have a great customer support staff, but the real value in Facebook is that we're a community. We have all these people and they're using the system, and each person has their social reputation basically that's just automatically there. And if somebody's behaving badly, our users report it. They say, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, and that could be something all the way down the route of something very, very bad, like I don't know, pornography or whatever, all the way up to just.
Let me give you a technical answer. There are a number of different reputation systems out there. There's one called Rapleaf. There's a platform called Opinity. My own belief of this is that based upon who you are, you're going to have your natural prejudices towards, like, I would totally trust Greenpeace and the ACLU's reputation system, but if the NRA or the Republican Party set up a reputation system, by definition, I wouldn't trust anybody in that organization, right? So reputation is very context-driven. Let's say if somebody was working for the Secret Service on this very panel, well, I would be holding my wallet and just kind of moving them to the side a little bit. So that's just the thing about reputation. It's all very context-driven. Final question.
Yeah, getting back to kind of like what a conversation is, and because there's lots of things that can start a conversation. It could be a blog entry, it could be just a Twitter, it could be a photo. And how do you go about like having different origins for conversations and then attaching the kinds of communication that people want to have on it, whether it be a rating, or they want to geocode it, or they want to hang a blog thread off of it, and
or
and
tag
all these
it.
kinds of things. Yeah, tagging, and how do you resolve all these different ways of the different types of information people want to communicate about a thing when its origin could be any different direction?
In 45 seconds. All right, so I actually call it that conversation aggregation. It's a feature I've promised one of our customers. So by the summer, we'll have that product. And the idea would be that there would be a thing called a conversation. You'd have to make it persistent. Say, this is now a conversation. I hereby bless you a conversation. And that page would then have all sorts of crap on it and whatever the hell you want to do. And it's probably a new startup of Evan's already. And, hopefully maybe, it'll be a Technorati feature or something. I don't know. I mean, it's very relevant, relative. It's not a clear definition. And we all kind of make it up as we go along. 7, 6, 5, 4. Any more? 2, 1. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.